thank you everyone for joining us for this week's presentation on staying connected to nature in this pandemic world we're living in. I know we're all likely tired of talking about this, but the fact remains that we will be living and enjoying the outdoors a bit differently for the foreseeable future. So we hope that you find this helpful and encouraging. My name is Chandra LeGue. I'm the Western Oregon Field Coordinator for Oregon Wild, based in beautiful Eugene, except that right now you just get to see my spare bedroom. For those of you who might be new to Oregon Wild, we are a statewide conservation group that's dedicated to protecting and restoring Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters as a lasting legacy for Oregonians. And that largely includes the public lands where most of us go to hike, to bike, to kayak, to fish, to watch birds. So hence our talk tonight. A brief overview of our program. Ruby McConnell is here with us tonight, and she will give her presentation first. Then I'll jump back in to talk a little bit about what's going on with reopening the outdoors and what that means. Following that, we will have time for some Q&A. You can, as we go along, enter questions into the little question bubble that should be on your screen as part of the GoToWebinar interface. And I'll be collecting those, and at the end I will sort through those and see how many we can get through. So try not to wait to the last minute to get your question in. If suddenly the screen freezes on you, or you lose the presenter's slide deck, or any of those sort of technical issues, try closing completely out of your browser and then rejoin the event using the event link that was emailed to you about an hour ago. That usually fixes things. A video of this webcast will be emailed out tomorrow, so you could share it. And it will also be posted on our website, OregonWilds.org, in the Wild blog. One more note, I know many of you bought tickets to our raffle, which we greatly appreciate. It helps, that sort of funding helps put it on presentations like this, as well as helps us do our important conservation work. You can still get tickets for $5 each where you signed up for this webcast. And we're giving away a couple of Ruby's books and a couple of my books, Oregon's Ancient Forests. So it should be well worth the entry. And we will do that drawing tomorrow morning and email the winners to confirm your shipping address then. So watch your email. Next week, our webcast will be a great program about the return of condors to the Pacific Northwest. We will have special guest Tiana Williams-Clausen, who's the director of the Yurok Tribe Wildlife Department, with us. And that's going to be fascinating. Condors are amazing animals. Sign-ups are on OregonWild.org now, and there will be a link in the follow-up email you get after tonight's webcast. So without further delay, I will turn things over to Ruby. And actually, a quick note before I do that, as hopefully you read before signing up, Ruby McConnell is the author of A Woman's Guide to the Wild, A Girl's Guide to the Wild, a companion nature journal and activity book that just came out to go with the Girl's Guide. And she's been really busy. She recently published a book of essays called Ground Truth, A Geological Survey of a Life, which is fantastic. Ruby's also a great friend to Oregon Wild and to me, so welcome, Ruby. Thank you so much for being here. I will make you a presenter now in a moment, and we will get carried away. 1 second.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's really exciting to see so many people coming together for these Oregon Wild events. I think that's a really great tribute to the Oregon Wild community, and I'm glad to be a part of that. As always, I love what Oregon Wild does. I'm going to be working on the assumption that most of you are in Oregon. So if that's true, go ahead and let me know in the chat and tell me what part of Oregon you're in. If it's not true, also let me know that in the chat. I'm able to sort of somewhat look at things as I talk to you.
Actually, Ruby, the chat's disabled for this webinar. So if they put the questions box, I can see that, and I can chat it to you. So just a little bit of roundabout.
Don't put it in the chat to her. You'll overwhelm her, or go ahead and overwhelm her, and that'll be funny, and I won't get to experience it. But so we'll go on with that. But hopefully you're all at least are as much in love with Oregon as I am. I was born in Portland, but I am here in Eugene. And tonight we are here to talk about, engaging with nature from this home space. And today in my thinking about this, I wanted to start with a story before I launch into sort of everything that I have. And in my thinking about this, earlier this week, I was being interviewed by a wonderful man up in British Columbia who has a radio show, and he was talking about reading Ground Truth, my environmental essays. And he said, I live in BC, and it's a city, and we know that it's beautiful, and we know we have these mountains, and we have the ocean, and we have all these trees, but from inside the city, it's easy to forget that we have access to all these beautiful places and these sort of renewing places, was how he put it. And he was talking about how nice it was to be reminded of how close those things are. And so that's the way that I'd like to sort of frame the discussion tonight, is in sort of reminding ourselves of how lucky we are in Oregon, and wherever we are in Oregon, even from the cities, even from our homes, of what we have here. So let me get some slides on the screen for you. So you should be able to see standard good author, Ground Truth, A Woman's Guide to the Wild. This is my work, and you can find out more about me at rubymcconnell.com. So along the lines of that, I wanted to start tonight with reminding us of where we come from. So in Ground Truth, I have a description of Oregon's forests. That's just 2 paragraphs that I'd like you to bear with me, just so that we can remember this wonderful place that we're here to celebrate tonight. Oregon's temperate forests are home to a startling number of living things, among them some of the tallest and oldest trees in the world. They are dominated by western hemlock, Douglas fir, western red cedar, white pine, along with more than a dozen other evergreens, species that arrived in the region as early as 50 million years ago, but whose ancestors are preserved in fossils that date back to at least 350 million years ago. Over that time, they have adapted to become uniquely suited to Western Oregon's cool, damp climate. The needles which they retain all year allow them to extend their growing season and conserve their annual energy expenditure. From a distance, these trees obscure all other forms of life. But portions of Oregon's forests contain as much or more biota per square foot than tropical rainforests, some of which is almost invisible. At the ground level, Oregon forests host myriad mushrooms, the above ground fruits of a vast network of fungi, many of which live symbiotically with the trees. Forests grow like this, in mutually beneficial layers called serrae, with ground cover like mosses and lichen resting at the feet of an herbaceous layer of flowers and ferns, which in turn settle under the shrubs of vine maple, salmonberry, rhododendron, mixed among larger trees of the understory, willows, big leaf maples, all housed under a coniferous canopy that nearly blocks out the light. This is what I think of when I think of home. And I think that's what a lot of us think of when we think of wild places in Oregon. I think we think of exceptional wilderness. I think we think of designated wilderness areas, places that are remote. And what I'm trying to encourage us tonight to do is to realize that every place in Oregon started out in that same unique way and has the same long geologic history. And so perhaps we can look really closely at our home place wildernesses because they matter, because they are our first and our most essential habitat, and because ultimately this is where we will abide while we anticipate and wait with excitement to go back out into the greater world. So let's talk about how we do that. And there's some like really basic things that we can do that can really connect us to our home spaces, regardless of how much land we might have, or if all we have is a balcony or a good window with a tree outside of it. I think that we can still do this. So one of the things that I encourage people to do that's really fundamental is the creation of habitat. So bird feeders, water features, bird houses, and bat boxes, the preservation of snags, standing dead trees, and living trees on your property, nurse logs, pollinator gardens, all the kinds of diversity in plants and features that you would find in the natural world. We try and bring that in. And you know, it seems like this really simple change, but I was gifted a bird bath just a couple of months ago, and this morning I spent maybe 15 minutes in absolute rapt attention at a baby blue jay who had come to this bird bath. And this was the sweetest little man. He had his blue feathers down his back, but he was fluffy and kind of half finished looking, like a cartoon character of a bird. And the wind was blowing, and there was maybe a little bit of rain, and the water was moving. And for at least 5 minutes, I did not know that I was inside my home as I sat and watched this bird kind of figuring out his first wings. And it reminded me of the simplicity of just creating that space and inviting nature to come in. Part of what's fun about Eugene is the urban wildlife. Those of you that are in Eugene know that we get a lot of deer. We also get large flocks of turkey. In Portland, where I grew up, we used to get pheasant. I have seen cougar in the city streets of Portland. So those are maybe not the ones to invite in, but as much as we can invite into the home space, I think it really makes for a healthy habitat for the animals, and it helps take some of the stress off of the wilderness areas that we're trying to protect, but it also gives us a deeper connection. And so since we're looking for that deeper connection, the next sort of element of that that I talk about a lot is, hold on, I'm trying to get my slides to advance. Oh no, hold on, everyone be patient. If I push the button too many times, no, it's not gonna let me. Let me stop sharing my screen for a minute and see what I can do. Showing the screen. This is going to be a slight problem. Hold on.
Ruby, I think you may just need to have this in presentation mode so that when you hit the the arrow button, it goes forward. It might not be like that.
I figured out. Y'all with me? I've done it.
Yeah.
That's a triumph for me. So, home space wildernesses and the diversity. So the next thing is sort of like engagement, right? So you might have some of these elements in your own space, right? But then how do we start interacting with them? And the most basic way is with gardening, or because I'm a geologist, putting your hands in the dirt, right? It is good for you to put your hands in the dirt. It is good to play with plants and good to look at rocks and just to engage. You know, if you are a beekeeper, you can be doing that. I am an avid bird watcher, and I think that there is power in bird watching from a home space and from your own backyard. In Oregon, we have such a great diversity, and we get such a great migratory bird season, both in spring and fall. So that's something that really changes over time. You know, looking really closely and sort of celebrating all of the elements of your garden. The other thing that I really appreciate in terms of engaging are things like weather stations. And this is, so one of the things that's happening for you guys tonight is I'm going to show you some of the images of, these are from projects that I included in either the Girls Guide to the Wild, the middle grade books, and there's also some images from the journal that I created in order to send to my publisher that I don't really normally share with people, but I thought that the Oregon Wild audience might be interested in. So this is a project that's from the Girls Guide to the Wild, and it's a super simple kid level weather station with a barometer that you can see over here and a little simple rain gauge. And just that act of sort of checking in with the weather on our own rather than checking our phones and sort of participating in that way can really sort of connect us and ground us in the outdoor space. Because I think so many of us are starting to, feel really confined. So there's things like that, like weather stations. I'm also a big fan of stargazing as an activity and as a shared and family activity. What's great about stargazing is that you can do it also in the morning, and sometimes that's the very best time. In the last several weeks, there's been a couple of really fascinating sky phenomena take place, where we've had really bright morning planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury in a sort of a line across the sky with the moon. And then of course there were the satellites that I think a lot of people saw, and we're going into an eclipse season. I think that looking up and checking out weather and checking out what's going on with the stars is something that we can often forget to do and often don't have time to do in our busy lives. And it's a good time to sort of learn the larger sky as well. And we'll talk about a little bit more about skill building in a little bit. But I find, I used to work at Space Camp just for a little while. And I found it really challenging to learn any constellations or even identify them once I knew the sky when I was out in the wilderness, because there's a lot of sort of sky noise. There's so many stars to see that it can be hard when you're first learning. And so when you're in a more urban location is actually one of the best times to start learning that sky map, because all you can really see is the bright stars of the constellations. So, other things that we can do in order to engage is keeping track of things as they progress through time. So again, with a weather station, you might actually make recordings of that, or here you can see on this side, this is a sky map, sort of tracking the moon as it passes a fixed point or a window over time, over the course of the month. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a phenology wheel, which is not in the books. And it's like I missed this activity and I wish I had put it in my books. And so now I'm telling everyone I run into about these. And phenology wheels track basically changes in plants and animals along the course of a month or a year or a week, whatever your time period is, and how that changes maybe with respect to the moon or weather. It's a great homeschool activity if you have kids at home that you want to be doing some natural science with, and that also you want to be engaging with the outdoors and get some art in. It's a great mindfulness activity for adults. And it's a fun project to sort of make as a gift too. I have seen some people do some amazing things with embroidered phenology wheels, which I think is a really astounding thing. But that practice of sort of returning to the same piece as time progresses can be really helpful to people. And then also all sorts of citizen science. So these are the original hand-drawn sketches that I made for the middle grade journal for a spring weather log to give kids sort of a sense of like what the template is, and field notes. And I really encourage people to do this sort of like personal citizen science stuff. I think that it serves as a reminder to go outside and spend time in your outdoor space in a way that we kind of forget about on a daily basis and in a regular way. And it also encourages us to look closely. And then it's also a skill that we can translate then to our outdoor experiences. And I find field notes really useful year over year. One of the things I wanted to show you, which I didn't have pictures of, but I think people can see in the corner, I keep a gardening log as well that just sort of has what the weather was and what plants were in bloom. So, you know, for 2015, in May, I have that there was occasional rain at night and it was quite warm in the high 80s. And I'm looking at today, you know, I had a puffy coat on and there were people walking past my house with gloves and, you know, beanies on their heads. So that's the kind of thing that to me sort of roots me into place and gives me sort of a sense of the passage of time and the sort of natural changes in our environment. So creating habitat, creating an outdoor space, engaging with that outdoor space through, you know, activity, citizen science, collecting of things. People love, you know, if you're a rock collector or a bug collector. And then if you're looking for community too, I encourage people to reach out to citizen science projects, which there are an enormous number of. Some run by places like the Audubon, the annual bird count, but you can actually go, Scientific American has an entire website devoted to connecting participants with citizen science projects, and it's scientificamerican.com/citizen science. You can also go to scistarter.com, scistarter.com, and they also have tons of resources for joining projects and starting your own projects. And this is exactly the kind of time for people to start thinking about doing those kinds of things. So what do we do after we've created habitat and we've tried to engage? The next thing that I encourage people to do in their homeland wilderness spaces is to really lean in to being, you know? So part of that is finding a quiet place and maybe taking your citizen science project and your engagement a step farther and starting to do some drawing or some journaling that allows you to sort of calm your mind and make a deeper level of observation than maybe we normally do when we're engaging in our outdoor activities for sport or exercise or recreation or socializing, which I think are all really wonderful reasons to be outside, but not necessarily accessible to us in this coming season, you know? So we do think about, you know, how are we looking and how are we engaging? So one of the things that I encourage people to do is notice different kinds of things. I think a lot of times what we're looking for is the long view, or you know, the awe-inspiring, deeply beautiful view, the viewpoint. You know, we're looking for everybody wants to take a hike that has a picture at the end of it, right? But sometimes just sitting really quietly and looking closely around you and noticing shapes and colors and patterns and movement and shadows and light, looking at the spaces in between things rather than the objects in front of you, trying to find a different perspective, and also really feeding one sense at a time. Typically, I think a lot of us, because we do spend time outside, surrounded by people, we can get really involved in the talking and the social part of the outdoors. And I think one of the things that we forget to do is listen. And so for me, moving into this summer period where I know it will be a less social outdoor season for me, one of the things that I'm excited about is doing a lot more deep listening and having the space to do that, and being able to take some time and close my eyes and listen and smell and do that more deeply than maybe I've taken the time to do that in recent years and in other circumstances. So along those same lines, I think that movement outside is just as healthy and wonderful as stillness or contemplative pacing. So anything like that is a calming and centering practice for you, if it's Tai Chi or if it's yoga or if it's meditation or if it's some other movement practice, take that into your outdoor space, because the idea is to sort of become the sponge and really start to lengthen the amount of time that we're spending outside total. Eliminate the car ride and just set foot into your own nearby wilderness space, into your own backyard, into the park that's underused, into the field that no one ever goes to, and really expanding the time that we're spending there and enriching that time by looking closely, by engaging, by doing those basic kinds of stewardship that come from paying close attention and valuing a space. So that all being said, I think my experience of people who are supporters of Oregon Wild is that they are outdoor people and they are probably chomping at the bit to get outside and to get onto some trails and to feel like they are adventuring. And let me tell you, well, you might feel like some of your wings have been clipped. You have been gifted an opportunity to improve your outdoor skill set. And based on the news from the Oregonian about the Coast Guard plucking kayakers out of water and people having to go rescue people off of trails, I think that it is high time for Oregonians to refresh ourselves on our skills. And I think that that is a wonderful way to prepare ourselves for re-entry. So I just want to remind you, this is my public service announcement. These are some things that you should be bringing with yourselves out camping. These are images from the original Woman's Guide. So this is the time, if you're someone who hasn't been excited to learn maps and navigation, this is your moment. This is the time to learn maps and navigation in your own neighborhood, in your own city parks, right? This is the time to do this even in your own backyard. Just the act of mapping your own property or your own neighborhood is so instructive for your overall map skills. Absolutely worth it. You'll get to spend time outside and you will notice all sorts of things that you have never seen before. your fire building skills. This is a perfect time to do so, and to do so in a really safe and controlled environment where you're not putting our wildlands at any kind of risk. And in fact, with the fire danger that we've had, backyard campfires are so much safer than a lot of wilderness campfire rings, that it's a great way to recreate the campfire experience with your family and get to have that shared time without risking our wildlands for our communal building, our community building. It's a really, really great time to start thinking about camp setup, going over your gear, making sure that everything is clean. First aid, first aid, first aid. This is the moment to take a first aid class. This is the moment to turn to someone and say, I'm going to learn how to wrap your ankle while it's not sprained, so that when you fall off that trail doing something silly, I'm going to be able to help you. These are all sort of really essential skills. And then the other thing is learning some things, right? So this picture is from the Andrews National Forest, the H.J. Andrews National Forest, which is a research forest outside of Corvallis. I think most people have heard of it. And they have this fabulous tree ring identifier thing. You would think I would have been more prepared with the name of that since I made a slide of it, but this to me was the most fascinating way of learning trees that I had ever seen, because they were showing the inside of it and you also got to see the bark. And I encourage you to, this is the year to learn to identify the trees. This is certainly the year to identify poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. Certainly the year to pick up your field guide and learn to make some observations. And as a geologist, I would like to say a thing or two about making observations. And the first thing I have to say is look closely. So if you want to learn to identify something in Oregon, first of all, mushrooms might be the thing. It's morel season. These are not these are chanterelles. But this is a time that we've been gifted. If you've always wanted to be able to identify mushrooms, to spend some time with your books and things like that. But just take a moment with me and look closely at the magnificence of these mushrooms. I felt like they were magnificent when I took the picture. I feel like they're magnificent looking at them now with their gills and the way that they've clearly pushed through the dirt to surface, and how they're clearly designed to take on moisture. Oh, this is an out of order. You don't get your dessert yet. We're looking closely still. As a geologist, we're taught, look up and look down. Look big and look at things that are small, and look really, really close up and take a really long view. Look at colors, look at textures and shine and smell and movement, and what are all of these things associated with? What's the individual element, and then how do these things group together? Scenes like what we're all looking at right now are scenes from home space wildernesses. This isn't the deep wilderness. This is all over Oregon. There's a great element of remembering to re-engage and use our wonder and our childlike sense of awe, even in our own backyards, that I think is really important for us to capture, kind of a curiosity and openness. And if you are having a hard time finding your curiosity and openness, start back at a s'more. Start back at your sense of childhood delight in being outside. Start with a campfire and a marshmallow on a stick and turn to someone that you love that is in your home space with you and tell them a story about yourself that they have never heard, or sing a song, or gaze at the stars together and find community and wilderness in our homeland spaces, because they really are still there, and it is the fundamental thing that really sustains us, just like all of our wild spaces sustain us. And so while we're doing that and celebrating these small things, I think it's a good time to educate yourself and engage with groups like Oregon Wild about your favorite places and your favorite activities and issues and the politics surrounding it and what you can do and what these groups need and how we can support them and make sure that they can continue to do the great advocacy work that they do. And so I think that that's the other really powerful place is once we've centered ourselves and really nourished ourselves in the homeland wilderness spaces that are accessible to us, turning that outward and making sure that all of Oregon's wonder and curiosity inspiring wilderness is still preserved for us. And so I actually have, before I hand it back to Chandra, she appears in A Woman's Guide to the Wild at the very end, and I would like to read just really briefly what I originally wrote that she had to say about taking people into the wilderness in Oregon. I said, Chandra acknowledges that the sheer size of the American wilderness can lead people to think it can never run out. And then this is what she had to say. But it's not that way. People don't realize how few of our public lands are actually protected wilderness areas. If it doesn't carry an official roadless wilderness or wild and scenic designation, it can still be logged. It can still have roads put in. There are a lot of lands that people use for recreation that aren't protected, and they don't even realize it. Part of best practices is being informed about policy decisions regarding public lands and educating others. Tell your friends, take them out and show them how special these places are. And that held true when this book came out a couple of years ago, and it holds true now. So I'm gonna hand it back with the caveat of bookstores and small publishers and authors all alike are struggling in this time. So at the end of this, if you are not the lucky winner, please contact me directly through my website, and you can order a book. If you are in Eugene, I have piles of books from a canceled book tour that I would love to pass on to local readers.
Thank you so much, Ruby. That's awesome. Okay. Let me get up my messy looking screen. Okay. All right, well, that was great. Pardon me for kind of looking to one side because I have notes to look at. Oh, I did want to make one note. Someone mentioned in the questions a great tip that she uses that relates to Ruby's presentation, and that is that she likes to spend time spying on her garden with her binoculars out of her door, which I think is wonderful to think about. Okay, so I'm going to, again, I'm Chandra with Oregon Wild, and I am going to spend a few minutes talking with you about actually going outside and what's allowed right now. I know that we're all probably itching to get out there and hit the trail or pitch a tent or launch a kayak after this spring of being at home. And the big question is, where can you go? And so before I actually answer that question, I'll note that there's still a lot of questions out there about whether you should go. And, you know, should you travel to trailheads, for example? And the answer is that no, you really shouldn't. The phase 1 reopening guidelines from the state say that we should all still stay close to home. Now that's open to interpretation, of course. But I think I'll get into some things that might help us guide us a little bit about that. But and also as things reopen and new phases kick in, recommendations on traveling a little bit further away from home will also change. Another question that I've been getting is, should you backpack? And the answer to this a few weeks ago was a little bit different, but now as things are changing, the answer from the Pacific Crest Trail Association, for example, is that it's okay to hike on the PCT, and if you're completely self-supported, overnight trips are all right. But the point being, don't travel too far from home to get there, and don't stop in communities or plan on being resupplied, because that adds an element of risk. So that's another common question I've been getting. Should you plan a camping trip? Well, campgrounds remain closed, though dispersed camping is open in many places on federal public land. It's not currently allowed on state forest land. And I'll go into some best practices in a minute about dispersed camping. But in essence, if you are completely self-sufficient and you're not going far away, it can be all right. So I know it can be frustrating and disappointing to have to cancel plans, change camping traditions that you have for Memorial Day, or spending time with a big group of friends. But at this time, the guidance from the state makes it really clear that staying close to home will help lessen the chance of spreading the virus. And at Oregon Wild, we're asking that people please respect all of these closures and recommendations for everyone's safety. And as Ruby mentioned, it's a great time to plan, for future trips. Build those skills, hone your observation and identification chops, and repair your gear, all that kind of stuff, so that you'll be really ready to get outside when it's safe to do so. So what's open? This changes day to day. I have a little list up here on the screen that most campgrounds are still closed. Crater Lake National Park is still closed. Some state parks are starting to reopen, and if I can get my slide to advance, on the Oregon State Parks website, it now shows, has a snifty map that shows what's open with restriction, and what is still closed. So you can check that out. I have a blog post on OregonWild.org under Wild Blog that has links to all of these different places that you can go to check specific types of agencies that are managing lands where we recreate. And then you should also check with city and county if you're not already up on that. But I bet a bunch of you already are. Let's see. What I'm missing. Okay, so moving on to some best practices now. So when it's safe and advisable to go to all these places that are reopening, there is still new changes to how we do things that we all need to be considering. Because even though the chances of transmitting coronavirus while you're outdoors seems to be quite low, that's really only going to remain true if we continue to follow, this practical advice to keep us all safe. So this list that's up here now is exactly what we've been hearing from all of our government officials for a couple of months now, but it is important that we continue to follow it. So staying 6 feet apart from other folks, even when you're on the trail, staying home if you're sick, practicing good hygiene, and kind of a new one is to wear a mask if you are going to be out and about and have to be close to other people. And I'll cover that a little bit more specifically for the outdoors in a minute. I've got this picture up here of someone hugging a tree, because that's still okay. You can still hug trees even if you can't hug other people that you may encounter on the trail. So more specifically to some outdoor activities, again, stay close to home is being advised. This cuts down on the potential spread of the virus, of course, because you're not stopping in small communities, you're not stopping for gas or supplies, you're not using restrooms that have other people using them. When you're passing on trails, provide a good passing space. That's that 6-foot distance. I know it can be hard to do on narrow trails, which is why it's handy to have a mask or bandana around your neck that you can just pull up. Or, of course, step off the trail if it's safe to do so where you are. Being extra cautious and not taking risks is important at this time because, our hospital workers and first responders are dealing with a lot. And it's just better to not have to go to the hospital right now. So don't go to really remote, out of the way places without telling anyone, or where you, where you might get a flat tire or sprain your ankle, for example. I know that this time of year is a great time of year to go to one of my favorite places, the Devil's Staircase Wilderness, which is notoriously remote and with difficult, rugged terrain. But I'm not going to go there right now. It's just not wise to take those sort of risks. So holding off until this thing passes. When you're out there, if you do find a restroom that's open, just be really cautious about touching anything that other people are touching. Those bathrooms are probably not going to be very clean because staff are focused on other things. Avoid carpooling with people outside your household. Again, that's about not spending time in close confines with folks so the virus spreads. And then when you get to a trailhead, leaving extra space between cars so that if people are coming and going at the same time, you're not getting real close to each other. I have a couple of other signs that you might see out there that kind of reiterates all of this. I've been doing a lot of research on where, this information I'm giving you. This one's from the BLM, kind of standard. And then this one's super cute. It's from the Adirondacks and uses little animals to illustrate how we should be practicing safe distancing in the outdoors. Let's see, a couple other best practices that that we should be considering, and that is to be extra prepared. We have the time right now to plan carefully, pore over maps, look at places we want to go, and also get our gear all together. So when we're going, when we're going out, we want to be completely self-sufficient. So you don't have to stop again in communities where we might be spreading the virus. Come prepared with all of your food, all your water, get gas in the town you live in, and make yourself a nice sanitation kit that has gloves and sanitizer, garbage bags, because you're probably not going to find those out there, and anything you need to pack out all of your waste, including toilet paper. Very important to have those things in sort of a little clean kit. Maybe one of the most important and hardest for a lot of people to follow is to avoid crowded areas. It sounds really nice to, go out to the gorge or the beach as soon as those areas open up. I guarantee you they're going to be slammed with people, and it's going to land us back in house arrest jail, and just not going to be safe for anyone. I have that fear for Silver Falls State Park, which opened up the other day as well. So think about going someplace else. There's a lot of great trails out there. There's a lot of places to recreate that that other people aren't going to be thinking of. So do your research and have those places in mind as your first choice, and also as a backup plan. If you pull up to a trailhead that is chock full of cars, have someplace else that you can go. Don't contribute to the mess that's there. And let's also consider the impact that we're having on the land. While parking lots aren't open, while bathrooms aren't being cleaned, while campgrounds are closed, people are dispersing a lot more. And it's really important to know all the leave no trace principles, which again, don't leave toilet paper in the woods. That is, doesn't matter that it's biodegradable, pack it out. Is one of the key things that I think we're going to be seeing more and more of as we don't have the facilities available and open, and it's just not cool. As Ruby mentioned, we need to be very careful about fires this year. It's shaping up to be likely a very bad fire season given the weather. And this year, wildfire crews are taking on a lot of extra risk due to the coronavirus, and we have a responsibility to prevent fires, both for the land and for these firefighters. Most wildfires are caused by careless humans, so we can do our best to be extra cautious and not light unnecessary fires, and do so in a very, very safe manner if we need to. And then finally, because a lot of trailheads are closed and people decide to go hiking anyway, they end up parking along roadsides or in places that might not be very safe. So let's consider safety when parking at these more dispersed sites, but also think about the resource damage you might be doing. If you're parking on vegetation, if you're parking on, along a ditch where there's water running or a stream nearby, just think about your impact there and take that into account. And finally, a question that I got early on was tonight was when the next Oregon Wild guided hike is going to be. And my answer is sure to disappoint, but the answer is not yet. We normally offer guided hikes throughout the year to help get people out to enjoy our public lands that we're working to protect. But of course, this program went on hold this spring, and we've decided it's still not safe to, or in anyone's best interest really, to start up our hikes program this summer. So we may reassess the situation come fall, along with some of our practices like carpooling, which might not be wise. So you can stay tuned for that. However, we are hoping to fill the void a little bit by people who love going hiking with us by offering our supporters something special. We're going to be rolling out a new benefit for joining our Evergreen Society of monthly donors. We'll be sending members an exclusive set of suggested hikes with descriptions and directions and all that kind of stuff that will both keep you away from crowds, give you suggestions for places to visit, as well as help you get to places that we are actively working to protect. So we're launching that in June in about 3 weeks or so. So you can stay tuned for those details, or you can, for the promotion, or you can go ahead and sign up to give $10 a month or more to Oregon Wilds, and you will be eligible for the benefit when that gets rolled out. So I'm excited to be providing a lot of those hike suggestions for you. All right, so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. A reminder, if you should see a little question bubble on the side of your screen, and if you haven't already asked a question there, you can go ahead and do so now. We just have a couple of minutes, but so far I don't have a ton of questions. So let me see what I've got. Looks like, and Ruby, feel free to come back on and we can have a chat through some of these questions. Somebody, this is a comment, but a good one, mentioned photography and how cell phones and we always have our cell phones with us, and cameras are a very interesting way of seeing the world a little bit differently. So I know I do that. I like to walk around my yard and take close-up pictures of bugs and flowers and my kids, and it really does help you see the world in a different way. So that's a great suggestion.
I would add to that, thank you for reminding me, time lapse. They're time-based art projects. Now is the time to do it. I have eggplants in their little pots that open up and catch the sun on one side, and then when I wake up in the morning, they have curled and are catching the moonlight through the window on the other side. And if I got it together to do a time lapse, it would be amazing. Yes.
That is awesome. Great idea. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions. The problem with being so thorough, I suppose, but I will, if any come in, I'll grab them before we completely end here. But before we sign off, I do want to mention that we do have 2 more webcasts coming up in the next week. One is tomorrow. It is a webinar that is a panel with a couple of scientists and an economist to talk about Northwest forests and carbon storing potential. That is at 4 o'clock tomorrow. It's kind of a special day and time, and you can register for that at OregonWild.org. And again, next week's regular Oregon Wild Wednesday webcast is about the return of condors, which again, I think is going to be super exciting and interesting. So, oh, sorry, I screwed up my screen share there. What I meant to do was turn it off. Let's see. Okay, I've got a couple more questions. One is just if Oregon Wild's still planning the Call of the Wild benefit in October. And I am sad to say that we have decided to cancel that. The governor says that we can't get more than 25 people together until the end of September, and our event is just barely into October, and so we don't want to plan for it. We are going to be coming up with some creative way of engaging our supporters and doing that sort of fundraising outside of the event in Portland. And one more question, Ruby. This is a good one. No pressure, but when can we expect the two of us to release another great book? You can go first.
The two of us together, we're still
maybe not together.
Oh, maybe not together. All right, I was gonna say have I held up your book yet tonight? The Oregon Wild book right here. This is the one. I actually have just signed another book contract. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, so I'll just tell the many dozens of you guys. And it's another environmental book, and it deals with the history of the Applegate Trail in Southern Oregon, the lesser known Oregon Trail, as it pertains to American environmental philosophy. And it will be out in about a year. It's a fast turn.
Wow, that sounds great, Ruby.
Thanks. Tentatively titled Wilderness and the American Spirit.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that was a good question. I have no plans to publish another book, but updates, hiking guide, and of course, all the writing that I do for Oregon Wild's website and newsletters it's always on the docket. So, well, thank you again, Ruby, for joining us today and offering that great advice and your thoughts on how we can enjoy our backyard wilderness. I thought that was wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And again, I hope to see you on another Oregon Wild Wednesday webcast. All right.
Thanks so much, everybody.